Hi, my name's Cecilia Poullain, and welcome to this episode of Brave New Women. All around the world, there are amazing, ordinary women doing extraordinary things. Brave New Women is about giving those women a platform and a voice, and it's about changing the way that women are perceived. And it's a way of inspiring all of us to do the things that we've always wanted to do. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce Kate Dennis to the podcast. And Kate Dennis is a well-known Australian film director. She's worked extensively in the US, in the UK, and is now back in Australia, and has worked extensively in Australia as well. She's directed many series and films, and what she's most known for is her nomination for an Emmy Award for directing part of The Handmaid's Tale. So, Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Cecilia. Thanks so much. I'd have to correct you there on one thing with films. I've directed second unit on movies, but most of my career has been in the television arena. I started off on films on the crew, but I've had an interesting journey with my feature films. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So first question, Kate, is why film? How did you get into film? How did you become a director? What was your motivations?
Well, I was studying fine arts and English honours, and I'd always had an interest in movie making and played around with, Super 8 cameras and things. But it wasn't until I was in fine arts and we had to do this one particular experimental film that I really realised there was so much about that particular medium that I loved, and that it wasn't just it wasn't just a solo exploit, but it was about getting so much of it is the creative side that you bring to it, but there's also how you work with all the other people. And so for me, it's like a bit of a symphony. If you can get everybody working towards the same creative goal at the same time, and if you're able to listen to everybody you work with, you can really make something special that is not just 2 + 2 = 4, 2 + 2 can equal, 105. If you really take on board all the parts that everybody has. And I love that collaborative process. I think a lot more. I was, doing a bit of writing at the time, and that was sort of a lonely pursuit. But there's something about working with a lot of people to realise a dream together that's incredibly satisfying.
So did you, how did it start? When did you graduated from university, and then?
I did. I actually was enrolled in 2 degrees. I was at Sydney Uni, but I was also at UTS doing communications. At the same time, one at night, which I discovered later wasn't, not I'm not entirely sure that was legal at the time to be enrolled in tertiary institutions, but that was back in the days of paper and nobody ever found out.
So in France, people do that all the time. In France, people are always enrolled into institutions.
I still don't know to this day, because I have pursued it. I don't really want to know one way or the other, but someone said to me, I'm not sure that you meant to be able to do that, but no one told me. I did. And, anyway, so, with the communications degree, I had to make a lot of short films, and off the back of that, I met a lot of people who were already working in the industry, and they invited me to come and work for free on movies. So I did, and I think really threw myself into it. And off the back of working really hard for free, I was then offered real work in the film industry. And it's a tough thing. It's a bit like, the travelling circus, crewing on films, and you're only really as good as the last job you do. Like if you make a mistake on the prior job, word will get out, don't hire her, she's no good. So you can't you can't afford to misstep, and you can't afford to put anybody's nose out of joint. You have to, be fairly socially adept, really. But I crewed on a lot of films, including Babe, the Pig movie, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and Cliffhanger in Italy, a film in Brazil on the Amazon where we shot for 7 months called At Play in the Fields of the Lord. So I got a lot of frontline experience as a clapper loader, this is what we're under focus puller. So that's in the camera department. That's the bottom rungs of the camera department, a clapper loader. You call out the slate, 75, take one, bang, 2 bits of wood together. Focus pull, you actually pull focus for the camera operator. They don't do that. You do that, and you have to know that that person's running at me. They're at 20 foot, they're at 10 foot, oh, they're at, 8'6".
So what do you actually do when you're a focus puller?
You focus the film. So this is back in the days of film. You can't operate and focus at the same time. It's too hard. So the focus pull, you have a tape measure. You run. These days, that's a laser with a readout, and it's really easy. They can just follow the numbers. I still have to anticipate a bit, but back in the days of film and tape measures, you had to do what's called getting your eye in. You had to stare at. I'd stay at home in my apartment and go, okay, that chair over there, I think it's like 20 foot away, and you get the tape measure out and you check it is, and you get your eye in so you could work out just how far it was from the lens. So a tough job, because then you'd go to dailies or the Russia screening the next day, and you'd be waiting to see whether everything was sharp, and it would be on your head if you'd shot a scene and the operator hadn't noticed it, that some of it was out of focus. And terrible feeling. Didn't really happen to me, thank God. But
that sounds incredibly, incredibly difficult, actually, to get it right.
It was a crazy. That's the hardest job on set, which is why I was glad when I was, I was kind of moving between camera and script supervising. I was on a film in Brazil when I was offered to that film on the Amazon, where I was asked to go up the Amazon on a remote unit and do both camera assisting and do the script supervising notes, because it was just a mini crew. And I did both, and I came back. The script supervisor was so impressed with the notes that she said, wow, you should do this. I think you're really good. You might even be better at camera assisting. And it was a bit closer to directing, because you're really watching the actors and you're making sure they match. And it's not just, was the top button done up in the last scene, but it's also performance levels. It's all sorts of things. And so you're like the person between the director and the editor, communicating between the two. And so she was so impressed that she took me to Italy for 6 months to Cortina d'Ampezzo to do Cliffhanger off the back of that 2 weeks. So, and then I started making more short films and being noticed for those. And then I got my first job was an anthology series called Twisted Tales, produced by Brian Brown, where up and coming directors got to do a half hour each.
You said at the beginning that you'd worked mostly in television, and that you had there was an interesting story behind your career with feature films. Tell me.
I would say it's my load to bear that I've had films get very close and then fall over because actresses get pregnant or something, or like I had one with Polygram, and then the whole company went under. So I've had it's been tough. Since my sort of success in the US, I get offered a lot of movies now, but now it's a matter for me of really choosing the ones that I'm passionate about. Now that I'm more experienced and older, I don't want to give a year of my life for something that I don't have passion for. So I have 2 projects that I've carried. One in particular that I'm very passionate about, called Almost French, which is an adaptation of the book by Sarah Turnbull, which I've now sort of rewritten so that it's much more contemporary, because she wrote that book over 15 years ago now.
Which is about?
It's about an Australian girl who meets a Frenchman, moves to Paris to be with him. And it's a romance, but it's about overcoming cultural difference and really learning to be who you are at your core, and not being defined by your culture, by where you grew up, any of those things, by being open and porous and being, I think, not seeing things through a prejudicial lens. That's what I loved about it. For me, there's things in that book that remind me of almost a Pride and Prejudice and something, where you have to learn not to prejudge, not to think things are going to go one way because you think how the French are going to do things. You have to stay open and learn and grow when you're in a cross-cultural relationship.
And that, of course, is a book that's very close to my heart, because it's so close to my experience of coming to France and marrying a Frenchman and living here, and having lived here now for 25 years. So, yeah.
25, wow. I had lunch with Sarah. Did I tell you? I let her read it finally after a very, very, very long time. She'd never read the script, and she read it last month and absolutely loved it. And Fred read it as well. So that was just a great moment for me, because you always feel like a horrible feeling you might be betraying the truth of someone's existence or somebody's relationship. And it was really, really, really wonderful. Yeah.
And what was your second project that's close to your heart?
Oh, the other one called All That I Am, from a book by Anna Funder. So that was, so she wrote Stars v Land. She's a really quite well-known Australian author, brilliant turn of phrase, really a great mind. And it's a story about the German refugees prior to Hitler coming to power, the ones who got out, and were political refugees who got out and tried to spread the word in Britain, and everybody had their head in the sand. And then there were, in fact, browncoats on the ground in London who were picking people up one by one. So it's a spy. It's a true story, though. And this was a group led by one very strong woman, so Dora. So yeah, it's a beautifully told story, very nuanced with this incredible twist at the end. So that's in progress too. So yeah. So I work in television, so it's hard for me to sort of carve out those. You have to carve out at least a year and a half to do a film, and so it's a juggle now, even working out schedules for those two projects vis-a-vis cast that we're going out to, vis-a-vis what my television commitments are. At the moment, I'm in an overall deal with HBO, so I'm committed to that, to them for the next. I'm sort of halfway through that. So. But in the situation we're all in, coronavirus, I'm not shooting, so I'm doing a lot of reading, novels, plays, scripts that they send, in the hopes that, one day we can, get one of them made. But the HBO have a lot of work ready to go, but they're not wanting to put people at risk in a lot of their shows. They're holding off till they know that they can do them safely. So, which I think is really great and really,
Yeah, it would be pretty difficult to be filming a love scene with both actors with masks on.
Yes, exactly. There are shows that are shooting and they're re-scripting around intimacy, and everybody on the crew is testing sometimes 4 times a week. Like,
wow,
wearing all the gear. Just even directing with a P2 mask on it's hard. You need a lot of oxygen when you're doing that job. You can work, well, I think now they're not doing, but usually you can work up to 14 hours a day in the US. They're now keeping it to 10 hours, which is good, because there's just so much other rigmarole that you have to go through to actually do.
So if you're directing, what does that actually involve? Like when you say you're directing for television, so where does the process start, and what actually happens? How do you spend your days when you're doing that?
But for me now that I'm what's called a pilot director, which means that I set up shows from scratch. So it starts with a script, and which I could have originated, or which might have come to me. Most often in the US, they come to me through my agent, and I read them. And because you have to give so much of yourself to the process, I really don't try to attach myself to something unless it really moves me, or I know I can absolutely inhabit it. So when I find one that resonates like that, then I'll tell my agent that, this is the one, let's jump on this. And I'll do meetings with the producers to check that we are going to be able to, collaborate together and that we have the same vision. I'll frequently do mood boards, so just sort of lookbooks where I pull images from other films or from paintings or photography that sort of give the mood of how I see the piece coming to life, and sometimes musical references, and also sort of spec casting, how the characters landed for me and who I would suggest we look at. Even if that's not who you go out to, it gives the producers an idea of your taste. When you're setting up a show, you're also going to be involved with all the casting. So if it's pilot, if you, in other words, setting up a show, you say then I get the job. Then the initial stuff is casting will take at least a month, because you've got to get your A-list, the people who are going to headline the show, and then you've got to fill in the entire cast, which could be up to 60, 80, 100 people. Not 100, probably 60, 65, 70 max. And then you are location scouting through all of that. So often you're scouting in a van with the first assistant director and the location manager at the same time as looking at auditions that are coming in. You're on your iPad I'm in the room with, auditions when I can, but these days you just don't have time to be in the room for all the auditions. So usually after they've done one round, I'll go in and, deal with the shortlist. Then you're working with a production manager to talk about the look. If you're building sets, you're discussing the shape of, the layout of the sets, and then he or she will draw up the plans and come to you, and you'll move windows, do whatever you think is going to make the space work. Then they'll get that costed. The line producer might come back and say that's too expensive. Then you'll reduce it in size. All the time you're trying to work out what you can do within the set budget that you have. And of course, then you're dealing with your costume designer working on, so you normally develop a palette for each actor, working not just with their skin tones, but with colours that work and convey, character, but also that you may work them in with another character so that they somehow those colours complement one another, or the patterning complements whatever. There's whole layers in terms of wardrobe that you have to go into. The same with makeup and haircuts. You're trying things out for everybody. What else?
Unbelievably detailed.
It's very detailed. Yeah, network on. You'll get notes on script notes, things that they want to see evolve, because you'll do a read through once you're, maybe a month out from shooting. You'll do a read through, and the network and studio will give you lots of notes about stuff they thought that didn't maybe come off the page in the way they thought it might, and they'll have script queries. So you go through that. You work with the showrunner or the creator on that. What have I left out? Oh, then you're also working on a schedule. So your first director is drawing up a schedule of how things are going to be shot, and you'll have to work out which locations you can pair together in one shooting day. And then if you have, you sometimes might have to move scenes to other locations just to make a schedule work. Like if you're going to shoot in one part of New York and you've only got 2 minutes of screen time to shoot there, that's not enough. You don't want to be then schlepping around, particularly in cities like New York. It just takes too long. You lose an hour and a half just to move. So you might try to find that bodega on the corner in that other area and move it from the sandwich shop you had in Brooklyn or something, whatever. And then you're talking to your cinematographer about the visuals. So they will have looked at your mood board or your lookbook. They will have got a sense of the palette. They would have got a sense of the lighting style that you want to use. You also would have interviewed the cinematographer and chosen them. So you would have discussed how you saw it. And they would also bring their own images. So sometimes what they'll bring will spark you and you'll go, yeah, well, actually we could shift that so that it goes more that way. So that's really great. Again, that's that collaborative thing when you're working with cinematographer and your ideas blossom into something much bigger or greater than you initially had. You'll do camera tests, lens tests, you'll do makeup tests, hair tests, and all that will go back to the studio. They'll look at the looks. They'll go, oh, I don't like the brown on that character, and can she have her hair down, and all that stuff. All this time you're doing location scouting right up till the end, because it's so hard to lock down locations and find the right ones.
That's one of the hardest things, is it? The locations.
Locations can be very hard, to find the right move to make it work in terms of the schedule. Yeah. I think that's the bulk of it. Yeah. You iron out any logic problems in the script, etc. Then once you start shooting, day one is always quite stressful, because certainly in the US, the network and studio are there, and they're all behind the monitors watching what you're doing. Then they're usually off after that. But in the US, if I'm shooting, what I love about it is I'll have the showrunner there. Certainly if you're setting up a show, they'll be on set with me at the monitor. So if an actor has an issue with a line or wants to make a change, which is rare, but sometimes happens, then that, you have the showrunner there. And also, it's good for them to see that the show is coming together in the way that they imagined it. And it's also great because you can bat any ideas around with them. You might see something in the moment and want to do, we should take advantage of the fact that the son is doing this. Maybe we should stage it over there, even though that's not where you wrote it.
What's the role of the showrunner?
The showrunner creates the show. So we don't really have them as much in Australia. In Australia, you have a writer, you have a creator, and the show running model they're trying to adopt, but it hasn't really taken off fully yet. The showrunner basically writes the initial episode, and in the US, often you'll just make that first episode, which is called the pilot, and then the network and will look at that and decide, okay, are we going to invest in a series? Even the pilot alone cost $10-12 million. But
wow.
It's crazy. And then and they make something like how many pilots? They make about 4 times more pilots than ever. I'm trying to think what the ratio was. I think it was something like, it's more than 4. I think it's something like, of all the pilots that are shot, the ratio of the ones that go to series is something like 6 to 1 or 9, between 6 and 9 to 1. I can't,
wow.
It's quite big. And a lot of, let's say 6 to 1. But so it's a lot of money that is spent, and it's a system that's been around for a long time in the US. And I'm always thinking, there's so much stuff that gets made that never gets seen. So it's been great for me because the 3 shows that I've set up in the US, and I had to work my way back up to being a setup director or a pilot director. All 3 of them have gone on to, went into series.
How did the move to the US happen?
The move to the US happened off the back of a show I did in Australia, a thriller called Secrets and Lies. And ABC America wanted to remake it with Juliette Lewis and Ryan Philippe. So they brought over the producer, and then they were looking carefully at the original, and they said they just loved the directorial work, and they said we want to bring the director over as well. So. And I went, I'm doing a pilot straight off the bat. And the producer went, no. You're doing 2 episodes, and you're lucky because everybody else is doing 1, but you don't get to leave Australia and land in Hollywood as a pilot director. I had to absolutely work my way back up that by doing episodes of other shows. Yeah. So yeah. So I directed episodes of different genres. I did comedies. I did thrillers. I did relationship dramas, all sorts of things, and finally got back to doing pilots really off the back of my Emmy nomination for The Handmaid's Tale. That's when I started to get pilot offers.
When you landed in the US, you just needed to do whatever they gave you to do. Is that how it works as you're working your way up?
That's right. You had to prove, because the Australian work doesn't really count over there. They want to see that you can do it. I don't know, with the amount of money they have there, with the pressure, it's just it's a real business there. Whereas in Australia, everyone's doing it because they love it and it's becoming a business. But there's just so much money in the system in the US that, they want to make sure that if you're in charge of the ship's not going to go down. And so they sort of test you. So I did things like cyber and, I got to do cable fare that I really liked, like, Turn Washington Spies, about George Washington's spy group, which was amazing. I did lots of different shows. Glow, which I loved. Fear the Walking Dead, that was fun because we got to shoot in Mexico. I'm Dying Up Here, which was executive produced by Jim Carrey, was a lot of fun. I did lots and lots of different shows in that episode. Yeah.
And tell me a bit about The Handmaid's Tale. What was your role in that?
I directed episodes 8 and 9 of season 1. And so, we shot in Toronto, in the very wintry Toronto. And my episodes were, one was on a bridge, and Janine had to jump off the bridge and throw herself into the water below. And it was that's the one I got nominated for. It was just a particularly hard sequence to pull off. We didn't know whether or not the river was going to freeze over.
Wow.
And if it had frozen over, the whole point would be null and void, because actually she survives the fall. And if it had been frozen, you wouldn't believe she survived the fall. So that was already, we were like, well, I guess with the VFX to make it look like it would have made it incredibly hard to shoot.
But she actually had to drop into the water, did she?
Well, we had the stunt. Yeah, we had a stunt woman in the water, but we didn't have the jump was against a green screen, and then you cut it together so it looks like she jumped in. So I to get the splash, you throw a giant rock in for the splash, and then you shoot the woman against green screen, and then you mat her into the drop. But I had her on the we had her on the edge of the real bridge, tied off, which is pretty scary to be acting standing on a bridge. And then she also had to act and hold a baby on the edge of the bridge, a real baby. And so I think it was a combination of the weather, the baby, the location we were in that made that episode incredibly hard to pull off. But the great thing about that show was everybody felt so committed to the material. And Elizabeth Moss was so much, not just, the lead actor, but she was so committed to the message in it, that so personally there for rehearsals, for everything, and so committed to making the scripts the best they could possibly be. I think, and everybody felt that way. It just felt like an important time to be making, the right time to be making this story. So there was something very special about that show. Yeah.
Do you now that you're in a position where you can choose which scripts you make, are there particular themes that you're looking for, or are there particular messages that particularly touch you, or that you're trying to get, that you think it's a right time to make a particular film, or do you just go on what you feel?
No, I think, you're always going to be asked why this project now, and I think for me at the moment, I'm interested in intolerance. I'm interested not really in telling the story, yelling it from the political mountaintop. I'm interested in telling stories about human tolerance and about, the human condition, really, through a more intimate lens. I'm interested in those areas where, it's not about right and wrong. It's about, well, actually, we could look at this from this, we could look at it from that, and so the audience is forced to really confront, well, I don't know which way is up, actually. This is really challenging. And it might just be a small personal story, or it could be told on a grandiose scale, but so I think that's what interests me. And I love when I can tell any story with a degree of humor, because I think it puts the drama in relief. So I think if you can get people to laugh and cry in the same show, you're going to get the full dynamic range of emotions, and the drama can sometimes be even more powerful if you have those moments. Really.
I love that idea of taking a situation and being in the intimacy of the situation and showing, what it means on the ground to tackle with some of the issues that we're looking at. What does it mean between 2, 3, 4 people to be dealing with what is also seen as a very big political issue, like sexism, racism, poverty, but looking at it on a very intimate scale so that it actually affects the audience.
That's right. I think we need to do that. We need to cycle backwards, because, I'm trying to get off social media, not just after watching The Social Dilemma, but I've never really been into it anyway. But you can see how it's just focusing people's point of view. It's just making people more and more extreme in their beliefs, and then we end up with all these camps and nobody communicating. And it's not a way for a civilization to exist. So I think it's really important to show how, nobody is perfect. Nobody is all right. Nobody's 100% correct. We're all flawed. We've just got to find our way through it. And we've all got to listen. We've all got to learn to actually listen to other people. So how great to people do that. I go through phases where I feel more like, I want to do something that's more, I don't know, with climate change, I was like, I can't bear it. I've got to do something really, really provocative. But a lot of the time those shows, you're only preaching to the converted. You're making something that only people that already care about it are going to watch. So I just really, really want to now go and just tell things on a human level. I just think then people can digest it, and it actually might have an effect, Otherwise they just won't even tune into it in the first place.
Yeah. And I love the idea of saying that we're all flawed. And when you say we're all flawed and we need to listen, what I'm hearing is that when we're flawed, we are made of what we're made of, and we're made of our experiences and our childhood and the things that we're scared of and the things that we're brave about, and we are just the way we are. And that by listening to people and really listening, going beyond just putting labels on people, we say, oh, well, this is where they're coming from, that's why they think like that, understanding that. And then once you can understand where someone's coming from, then you can start a dialogue with them to say, okay, I understand them, maybe you understand me. But I think one of the difficulties we've got is that just takes it takes a hell of a lot of time, and it also takes a hell of a lot of openness. I mean, if I've got someone standing in front of me who I feel is bigoted or closed-minded or, an asshole, then I'm not going to spend the time to actually understand that person and where they're coming from. So, yeah.
It's hard. I mean, sometimes, we don't, you're right. We're all short of time. And if there's, I guess, yeah, I don't know. So sometimes I think in those situations that I all you can hope for is that maybe you're able to hold a mirror to something so that at least that person can see themselves back maybe in a different way, or at least see the way that I don't know. And if you can't let it all in, if you can't absorb it all and somehow find your way into their brain, you're right. I mean, that's why I think drama and telling of stories, is important, because people they want to inhabit other people's emotional realms, and it can be a very nuanced and effective way to crack open fresh thoughts.
And also, the story has been around forever. Since there've been human beings, there's been stories. So for me, it's just a continuation of story as a way of shining a light on what our society is and what we need to learn, the nuances of our societies. Yeah. No, I love that.
Yeah.
I finished these interviews. I asked 2 questions. And the first question is particularly relevant in the industry that you work in, which is what has been your experience in your career as a woman? Has that had an impact? Has it had no impact?
Well, that's a very good question. When I started, I was one of the very few women doing what I did, particularly in the camera department. There are very, very few women. And, I often look back on that time and I think, things happened to me that I probably should have reported but didn't, because that wasn't what, nothing terrible happened to me, but just little things that you sort of think, this probably shouldn't be going through to the keeper. But, when I chose to deal with it with humour and to sort of, it was that thing of reflecting. Yeah, a lead actor came up behind me and first day directing on a fairly big budget series in Australia, and put his arms under my arms and put his hands here. No, he didn't touch me, but he had his hands here. And said, it's so good to work with a female director, and then took his hands off and went. And all I remember is I saw a giant T intersection like this, and I was young, and I was, it was my first big opportunity, and I was just like, that probably shouldn't have happened. Either I go up and say, so-and-so is behaving in a way that's really not appropriate, I go to the producer, or I just make him feel like a bit of a dick and with humour. And so I went that way, made him feel like a bit of a dick with humour, which worked, and just shut it down, and he never did it again. And that worked, in the moment for me, and that was, the culture that I guess that I was starting off in. And I found that humour was great for finding my way through things, and I really didn't, it did work for me. But I look back on that period and I wonder if what I did was the right thing for the generation that was coming after me. So sometimes I think, do I need to be part of the problem? Should my generation, and it wasn't just me that was using humour to diffuse things, we were all doing it. Should my generation have called out things like that earlier? It's a hard thing, isn't it? With perspective, you can look back and maybe, yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I tend to think that treating with humour, if it actually stops the behaviour, is a pretty powerful tool.
Yeah. Well, it stopped it for me, though.
Yeah.
I don't stop it for other women. It stopped it for me, and that worked for me. But not everybody defaults to that. And
so what sort of thing would you say?
I honestly, I can't remember what I said. I would love to be able to remember what I said. I can't. I'm probably revealing too much person doing it if I even tried to go there. But the funny thing is, so at the beginning of my career, it was tough because there were very, very few women doing it. It was tough, and you had to be a camera assistant. You had to seem to be as strong as a man. You had to drink beers on the back of the truck. You had to fit in with that whole, machismo sort of world. But at the current place in my career I'm in, it's been great because now they're trying to, they're actively looking for more female directors. So when I got to the US, I arrived at a really, really good time when they were trying to hire more female directors. And, it's diversity. The council's diversity. So, so I was lucky at that end. So I can't complain when you put it all in the, mixing bowl of love.
And the last question I ask is, do you have a particular message for people who are listening?
Well, I don't know what my audience is, but meaning I don't.
Neither do I. That's the thing about a podcast.
A particular message.
Something I'm thinking about something like the attitude that you've had in terms of your career.
You mean, so, okay. My advice is never this is career related, and I think what I've taken away from my career path so far is never prejudge a situation, never prejudge another person. You never know. It'll take you a while to work out who they really, really are. And also you never know what is around the corner, who or what is around the corner. Just stay open and keep listening. Would be my advice.
That's a great message.
And that involves also listening to your own instinct. What has got me to the point that I am at is maintaining sort of communication between my instinct and my head and my heart. And if you can keep your head and your heart connected and you're working creatively, then I think your compass will always find some sort of truth, a truth for you. And that's important.
Funny, every time I ask people what message they have, what they say relates directly to me. So it speaks directly to me. So that's so great. So thank you for that. Well, thank you very much, Kate. It's been, I just loved spending time with you and hearing about your career. And I think you've just done amazingly well. So congratulations. I look forward to seeing what comes out next. Those that you're directing next.
Well, I look forward to listening to your podcast and reading or writing.
Okay. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Brave New Women. On Friday, 22 January, I'll be holding a free webinar to talk about how women can stand up and speak up. There'll be 2 sessions, 8:30 a.m. in Paris, which is 6:30 p.m. in Sydney, and then the second session at 2:30 p.m. Paris, which is 8:30 a.m. on the US East Coast. If you'd like to join us, please connect on LinkedIn or on the Brave New Women Facebook page. Thanks so much for listening.